Every gold ring on every hand, every Olympic medal ever awarded, every crown that ever sat on a king's head, all of it was born inside an exploding star. Billions of years before Earth existed, humanity has been obsessed with this metal for 6,000 years, long enough to bury it with pharaohs, long enough to sail across oceans no one had ever crossed, chasing rumors of it, long enough to build and burn entire empires in its name, long enough that the same instinct which drove a Bronze Age chief to hoard it drives a modern central bank to do exactly the same thing today. Here's the strange part. We don't need it to survive. You can't eat it. You can't build a house from it. It won't heal a wound or plant a field. And yet right now, in underground vaults on every continent, nations are guarding thousands of tons of it like their lives depend on it, behind blast doors, armed guards, and layers of secrecy. Why? Because for 6,000 years, gold hasn't just decorated civilization. It has ruled it. It has ruled religion. It has ruled armies. It has ruled trade, empires, and, right now, in a vault under Kentucky, it still rules the money in your pocket. This is the story of how that happened. Stay with me, because it starts before humans, before Earth. In a collision so violent, it makes anything in the story that follows look small. Gold before humanity. Gold can only be created in the most violent explosions in the universe. Not born gently, forged. Two neutron stars, objects so dense a single teaspoon of one would weigh millions of tons, the crushed corpses of stars that died long ago, spiral toward each other over millions of years, circling faster and faster as the gap between them closes. Then they collide. The blast is called a kilonova, and for a few brief days, it blazes with the light of hundreds of millions of suns, flinging newly forged heavy metals out into space at a fraction of the speed of light. In 2017, astronomers watched one happen for the first time in recorded history. Detectors on Earth felt the ripples in space-time itself, and telescopes swung around to catch the afterglow. They confirmed what physicists had suspected for decades. Every atom of gold on Earth is debris from an event like that one. The debris scattered across the galaxy. It drifted for billions of years inside vast clouds of gas and dust, clouds that eventually collapsed under their own gravity to form our sun, our planets, and this one. The gold in your wedding band is, quite literally, older than the ground you're standing on. And still, gold is almost impossibly rare. Every gram of it ever mined, from every mine in all of human history, would fit inside a single cube about 22 meters on a side. That's it. Thousands of years of digging, dying, and dreaming. And the whole haul would fit under the roof of a modest building. You could park it in a parking lot. But rarity alone doesn't explain gold's grip on us. Here's what does. Gold doesn't rust. It doesn't tarnish. It doesn't rot, corrode, or decay. Not after a year, not after 10,000. Bury it, drown it, melt it down and pour it out again. It comes back exactly as it was, the same color, the same shine. Almost nothing else in the natural world behaves this way. And that single fact, that gold does not die, is the seed of everything that follows. A thing that lasts forever is a thing you can trust forever. That is why it would come to rule us. Long before civilization existed, gold was already lying in the rivers and rock of a young planet, waiting. It had no idea what it was about to become. Early humans discover gold. Somewhere along a riverbank, thousands of years before the first city was ever built, someone crouched at the water's edge and saw something strange glinting in the silt. Gold doesn't hide the way other metals do. It doesn't need mining or smelting to be found. It simply lies there, in nuggets and flecks, washed loose by the water and heavy enough to settle where the current slows. It doesn't need to be dug out of the earth or coaxed from ore in a furnace. All it takes is a pair of eyes and a moment of curiosity. In modern-day Bulgaria lies a burial ground called Varna, dating back nearly 6,600 years. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than writing itself. Inside it, archaeologists found thousands of gold objects, worked with a skill no one expected from a people that early. And inside one grave, a grave with no body in it at all, they found more gold than in almost any burial from that era anywhere on Earth. Historians believe it was a symbolic tomb, an empty monument for someone so powerful that death itself needed a marker. That's the first clue to gold's power. It wasn't traded for food. It wasn't used to buy anything. There was no economy for it to belong to yet. At Varna, gold already ruled something far older than economics, status, and the fear of being forgotten. Around the same era, in the royal tombs of Ur in Mesopotamia, gold headdresses and daggers were laid beside the dead. Delicate, gleaming offerings meant to be carried into whatever came next. Why gold, and not some other shiny stone? Because everything else around these people rotted. Flowers wilted. Wood cracked and split. Bronze turned green. Even the bodies in the graves returned to dust. Gold did nothing. It simply stayed. Perfect, untouched, eternal. And if you wanted to offer your gods, or your dead, something that would never decay, there was only one candidate on Earth. Gold wasn't money yet. It was a promise against death itself. And one civilization was about to turn that promise into an empire. Egypt turns gold into power. The Egyptians believed something extraordinary, that the flesh of their gods was made of gold, not symbolized by it, made of it. Their skin, their bones, solid, incorruptible gold. That single belief reshaped an entire civilization. If gold was literally divine flesh, then whoever controlled it controlled a piece of heaven, and no one controlled more of it than the pharaoh, a man the Egyptians did not consider a mere king, but a living god walking among them. Every gilded temple door, every obelisk tip blazing white-hot in the sun, was proof of that claim, engineered to be seen from miles away and to leave no doubt about who ruled. In 1922, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter had spent years searching the Valley of the Kings, funded by a wealthy patron who was rapidly losing patience and money. Most experts believed the valley was empty, picked clean by tomb robbers centuries earlier, every secret long gone. Carter kept digging anyway, down to the last season his backer would pay for. Then he found steps cut into the rock, sealed doors, still bearing their ancient markings, and behind them, a tomb almost no one had touched in 3,000 years. When he finally chiseled a hole and held a candle to the gap, he saw gold everywhere. Wonderful things, he said. Inside was Tutankhamun, a minor pharaoh, a teenager who ruled for less than a decade and should have been a footnote in history. His burial mask alone was carved from over 10 kilograms of solid gold, inlaid with blue glass and precious stones. And here was the thought that stunned the world. If a minor, forgettable boy king was buried in that much gold, what must the great pharaohs have taken with them into the earth? None of it existed by accident. South of Egypt lay Nubia, a name many scholars believe comes from an ancient word for gold itself. Egyptian expeditions pushed deep into Nubian territory and built something close to an industrial mining operation. Workers, often enslaved, crushing gold-bearing quartz by hand and grinding it to powder under the desert sun, dying in numbers no record ever bothered to keep. This is the moment gold stopped being ornament and became instrument. In Egypt, gold didn't just decorate power, it manufactured it, funding priesthoods, paying armies, and underwriting a religion that told an entire nation their king was a god. And here was the proof, gleaming on his mask. Egypt had shown the world exactly what gold could do for a throne. It wouldn't take long for the rest of the ancient world to start taking notes. Gold spreads across ancient civilizations' word, and gold traveled. Before the names start piling up, hold on to one idea. None of these peoples could reach the others. No shared language, no border, no god. And every one of them, alone, decided this metal was the most precious thing on earth. In Mesopotamia, gold flowed through trade routes, stretching deep into the Fertile Crescent, appearing in some of the earliest legal texts ever written. Clay tablets set fines and debts and dowries in fixed weights of it. using gold as a measure of value long before anyone had thought to strike a coin. It was becoming a yardstick for worth itself. In the Indus Valley, gold ornaments turn up in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, worn by people whose names and language we still cannot fully read. In India, gold became something closer to sacred, bound to the goddess Lakshmi, woven into weddings and festivals and rituals in a tradition so deep it still shapes Indian culture today, where families store wealth in gold jewelry passed down across generations. In China, gold had a rival, jade, which for long stretches outranked it among the elite. Gold marked status and adorned the powerful, but jade marked the soul, and the two never quite traded places. In Greece, gold became a myth, the golden fleece, guarded at the edge of the known world, worth a hero's entire journey to seize. King Midas, whose touch turned everything, his food, his wine, and finally, tragically, the daughter he loved, into cold, lifeless gold. It was a warning, wrapped inside a fairy tale. Gold could give you everything, and take everything from you, in the very same instant. And next door, the Persian Empire simply hoarded it. Vast royal treasuries, stacked with tribute gold, gathered from across a sprawling territory, funding armies so enormous they terrified the Greek city-states, who eventually went to war against them. Different civilizations, many with no contact with one another, thousands of miles and sometimes centuries apart, and every single one arrived at the same verdict. This metal was worth more than almost anything else they could hold in their hands. All that was missing was a way to make that verdict official. Someone still had to turn gold from a symbol into a system. Gold becomes money. Imagine trying to buy bread with gold. You can't just hand it over. You have to weigh it, test its purity, and hope the person across from you trusts your scale as much as you do. Was it pure or cut with cheaper metal? Was the merchant's balance honest? Every single transaction was an argument waiting to happen. Then, in the kingdom of Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey, someone solved the problem. Around the 7th century BCE, Lydian rulers began stamping small lumps of electrum, a natural gold-silver alloy that washed down from their rivers, with an official mark guaranteeing weight and purity. History's first true coins. That stamp changed everything. A merchant no longer needed to trust a stranger, or a stranger's scale. He only needed to trust the king's seal. The value was in the mark, not in the argument. Trade, for the first time in human history, could move at the speed of a handshake. King Croesus of Lydia pushed the idea further, separating gold coins from silver ones and standardizing their values so precisely that his name is still spoken today, rich as Croesus, to describe wealth so vast it sounds like exaggeration. He didn't just have gold, he had a system for turning gold into unquestioned power. Greek city-states copied the idea almost overnight, stamping their coins with gods and civic emblems, each polis advertising itself in metal. Marketplaces exploded with new life. Temples and moneylenders began holding coined wealth on behalf of others, the first faint flickers of banking. Governments could now tax, calculate, and fund armies with a precision that clumsy barter had never allowed. In Lydia, gold had ruled trust. And once trust could be minted, stamped, and carried in a pocket, it was only a matter of time before someone realized coined gold could also buy something far more dangerous than bread. It could buy conquest. Rome builds an empire. On gold Lydia had taught gold to count. Rome would teach it to conquer. That's the pattern to watch from here on. Every age doesn't just inherit gold, it finds a new way to be ruled by it. At its height, Rome controlled nearly a quarter of everyone alive on Earth. But legions don't march for free. Spain became one of Rome's most prized possessions, not for its wine or its wheat, but for the gold buried in its mountains. To get at it, Roman engineers devised a method called hushing, and its scale is hard to believe even now. Thousands of laborers dug a honeycomb of tunnels through an entire mountainside, threading channels through the rock. Then, on command, engineers released millions of gallons of stored water all at once. The hillside didn't just erode. It exploded outward, the ground itself collapsing and washing away, exposing the gold-bearing rock beneath in a single violent instant. At Las Medullas, that scarred, half-collapsed landscape of jagged red spires is still visible today, an entire mountain range reshaped by human greed, 2,000 years later. That gold went straight to the legions. Rome's rulers understood a hard truth. An unpaid army was more dangerous than any enemy at the gate, because a hungry soldier with a sword might decide to pay himself. Gold coinage, the aureus, paid soldiers, built the roads that stitched the empire together, and funded a vast bureaucracy stretched from the reign of Britain to the deserts of the Middle East. But gold also exposed Rome's rot. As the empire strained under its own enormous weight, emperors began quietly shaving gold out of every coin they minted, mixing in cheaper metal while insisting the stamped value stayed exactly the same. It was theft disguised as currency, and it worked, for a while, until people began to notice their coins felt lighter and bought less. Prices climbed, trust cracked, and once trust in the coin cracked, no amount of imperial stamping could hold the economy, or the empire, together. Rome had ruled the known world with gold. Rome also proved, for the first time at civilizational scale, that gold could unmake an empire just as easily as it built one. When Rome finally fell, it left behind roads, law, language, and a warning the medieval world was about to hear, loud and clear. The medieval quest for gold. Rome fell in the west. In the east, it didn't, not for another 1,000 years. The Byzantine Empire kept its gold coin, the solidus, so reliably pure for so many centuries that merchants across 3 continents trusted it without question, even while nearly every other currency around it wobbled and collapsed. Its purity was a kind of quiet superpower. To the south, Islamic caliphates built an economic zone larger than Rome had ever controlled, stitched together by the gold dinar, moving merchants, scholars, and ideas from Spain to the edge of China along the same well-worn roads. But the single most staggering gold story of the entire medieval world comes from West Africa. In 1324, the ruler of the Mali Empire, Mansa Musa, a man historians still consider possibly the wealthiest individual who has ever lived, set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca. He didn't travel light. Some accounts describe a caravan of thousands, soldiers, officials, and servants, camels loaded with gold, an entourage so lavish it stopped entire cities in their tracks just to watch it pass. When he reached Cairo, he gave away so much gold, so freely, that the local economy didn't recover for over a decade. The price of gold in Egypt genuinely crashed, collapsed under its own abundance, because one African king passing through simply couldn't stop being generous. Word of Mansa Musa rippled outward and reached Europe, and Mali began appearing on medieval maps, sometimes drawn with a black king seated on a throne, holding up a single golden nugget, as if to tell every European who saw it, somewhere out there, beyond the desert, an entire kingdom is made of this. Meanwhile, in Venice and Genoa, ambitious merchants moved that same gold across the Mediterranean, inventing early credit, contracts, and banking systems along the way to keep it all flowing. By the end of the Middle Ages, gold had done something no army and no religion had ever managed. It had linked Africa, Europe, and Asia into a single web of ambition. And across an ocean no European had yet dared to cross, entire civilizations were about to discover just how far people would go to take that gold for themselves. Gold rushes and global exploration. Here the map breaks open. For 6,000 years, gold had ruled the old world. Now it would cross an ocean and rule a new one. And this time, the hunt for it would swallow whole civilizations. In 1492, Christopher Columbus wrote something remarkable in his own journal, that gold was so valuable it could practically open the gates of paradise for a soul. He wasn't speaking poetically or reaching for a metaphor. He believed it, plainly and completely. When he reached the Caribbean and saw small gold ornaments on the people he met there, he assumed he'd found the ragged edge of something enormous. He had no idea what was coming, for him or for them. The Aztec Empire treated gold as sacred and ceremonial. Beautiful, meaningful, but never currency. The Inca called it the sweat of the sun, too holy for ordinary trade, reserved for gods and rulers. Neither empire understood that this difference in meaning would mean absolutely nothing to the men who arrived next. Hernán Cortés brought down the Aztecs. Francisco Pizarro brought down the Inca, ransoming an emperor for a room filled with gold and then killing him anyway. Both campaigns were driven in large part by gold, and both left behind a trail of devastation so severe it gave rise to a legend that outlived the empires it destroyed. El Dorado, a lost city of gold so rich it drove explorers to their deaths for 2 more centuries, searching jungles and rivers for a place that likely never existed at all. The gold that was real was staggering enough. Spanish treasure fleets, heavily armed convoys hauling New World gold and silver back across the Atlantic, became so fabulously valuable that pirates, privateers, and rival navies spent the better part of a century trying to sink or seize them. Losing just one fleet to a storm or an ambush could cripple a kingdom's finances for years. 3 centuries later, gold struck again, this time entirely by accident. In 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall spotted a few flecks of gold in the tail race of a sawmill on a California river. He tried to keep it quiet. It didn't stay quiet for long. Within a year, ships arriving in San Francisco were being abandoned in the harbor, left to rot at anchor, because every sailor on board had bolted for the hills the moment they docked. Farmers walked off their land mid-harvest. Fathers left their families behind, chasing a rumor across a continent. The 49ers built an entire state almost overnight, out of nothing but hope and dirt and desperation. Australia caught the same fever in the 1850s. The Klondike caught it at the century's end, sending prospectors trekking through brutal Arctic cold over frozen mountain passes for a bare chance at a creek bed. And in South Africa, deep beneath the Witwatersrand, miners eventually dug down more than 2 miles into the earth. Some of the deepest mines humans have ever built, hot enough to kill, all chasing the same metal that once glinted in a shallow riverbed in Bulgaria 6,000 years earlier. Gold hadn't just been discovered anymore, it was ruling migration, dragging entire populations across oceans and deserts and frozen wastes on nothing but a promise. And soon, it would be asked to do something even bigger, hold together the money of the entire modern world. Gold in the modern world. For much of the 20th century, your money wasn't just paper. It was a receipt. Under the gold standard, $1 or £1 could, in theory, be walked into a bank and exchanged for a fixed amount of actual gold sitting in a vault somewhere. The system gave currency something solid to stand on, a promise you could physically collect. But it was rigid, and during the Great Depression, that rigidity became a trap. Nations couldn't loosen their money supply to fight the crisis because it was chained to a finite stockpile of metal that simply couldn't grow fast enough. In 1944, with the Second World War grinding toward its end, delegates from dozens of nations gathered at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and built a new system from the ground up. The US dollar pegged to gold, and every other major currency pegged to the dollar. Gold, once again, was quietly running the world, just one level removed, sitting behind the curtain. That arrangement held until 1971, when the United States, under mounting pressure and with its gold draining away, simply cut the cord. The Nixon shock ended gold's official reign over money and ushered in the currency system we still use today. Money backed by nothing but trust in a government that says it has value. And yet, gold never actually left the building. Fort Knox has become almost mythical, a fortress so associated with unbreakable security that its very name is now shorthand for anything impossible to steal, guarding one of the largest gold reserves on Earth behind granite, steel, and soldiers. Central banks worldwide still hoard the metal, quietly buying more, for exactly the reason Lydia discovered 27 centuries ago. Gold doesn't need anyone's promise to be worth something. When currencies wobble, when inflation bites, when trust in governments falters, gold is still the thing everyone, everywhere, agrees is real. Even something as simple as an Olympic gold medal carries that old instinct forward. Though today's medals are mostly silver, with only a thin layer of actual gold plating, the symbolism hasn't faded one bit. We still reach for gold, even in miniature, even in name only, to mark the absolute best a human being can be. Everything around gold changed in the 20th century. The economies, the technology, the politics, the wars. Gold didn't change at all. It simply kept being the one thing everyone could agree to trust. Gold beyond jewelry. Gold conducts electricity beautifully, and unlike copper or silver, it barely corrodes at all. A gold connection made today will still carry a clean signal 50 years from now, long after cheaper metals have quietly tarnished and failed. That's why there's a trace of gold inside the phone in your pocket right now, in the circuit board, in the tiny connectors that have to work every single time, chosen specifically because it won't let you down at the worst possible moment. That same stubborn reliability made gold essential the moment humanity left the planet. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful telescope ever built, is covered in a microscopically thin layer of gold across its 18 honeycomb mirror segments, because gold reflects infrared light better than almost anything else known to science. Without that gold, humanity's clearest images of the early universe, light that has traveled for over 13 billion years, simply wouldn't exist. Astronaut visors carry the very same coating, thin enough to see through, filtering out blinding, dangerous solar radiation without blocking an astronaut's view of the Earth shrinking behind them. Even medicine reaches for gold, in long-used treatments for inflammatory disease, in nanoparticles now being tested to hunt down and diagnose cancer, in dental crowns that can sit inside a human mouth for decades without ever breaking down or poisoning the body around them. It's almost poetic. The exact qualities that made a Bronze Age priest believe gold was the flesh of a god, that it never corrodes, never fades, never dies, are the same qualities that let a telescope photograph light from galaxies billions of years old. Gold never had to evolve to stay relevant. The world just kept finding new reasons to need exactly what gold always was. It no longer rules from a crown or an altar. It rules from inside the machine, too useful to remove, too faithful to replace. The throne only changed shape. Gold is still sitting on it. The future of gold. Here's the part of the story most documentaries quietly skip. Gold mining has a body count, and not just a historical one. Modern mining still tears apart enormous volumes of earth to extract tiny amounts of metal, sometimes moving tons of rock for a single ring's worth of gold, often using cyanide and mercury that have poisoned rivers and water supplies in mining regions around the world. That cost is finally catching up with the industry, and pressure is building, from consumers and governments alike, for cleaner, safer, more accountable sourcing. One quiet solution is already well underway. Gold never wears out, so it never truly has to be thrown away. A growing share of the world's gold supply now comes from melted-down jewelry, discarded old electronics, and industrial scrap, not from new mines at all. Some of the gold in your jewelry box may have once sat in a Roman treasury, or glinted at the bottom of a 49er's pan, or hung around the neck of a queen, simply melted and reshaped again and again across the centuries, its story hidden inside it. And beyond Earth entirely, scientists are already eyeing a stranger frontier: asteroids, some of which are believed to carry vast quantities of gold and precious metals, the same cosmic material that seeded our planet's supply billions of years ago. Deep-sea vents on the pitch-black ocean floor hold gold too, threaded through the rock where hot water meets cold. Both ideas remain mostly theoretical for now, held back by staggering cost and risk. But they hint at something remarkable. Humanity's next gold rush might not happen on any continent at all, or even on this planet. So has our relationship with gold really changed? Not at its core. The methods keep shifting. River panning, industrial mining, recycling, maybe someday asteroids and ocean floors. But the reason gold matters hasn't moved an inch in 6,000 years. Conclusion: civilizations rose. Empires vanished. Currencies collapsed into worthlessness. Religions changed beyond recognition. And gods were forgotten entirely. Gold outlasted every single one of them. It had meaning before it was money. Buried with the dead at Varna, long before anyone on earth had a word for wealth. It was divinity in Egypt, trust in Lydia, conquest in Rome, connection across the Sahara, obsession across an ocean, and finally, the quiet anchor sitting in vaults under Kentucky and beneath central banks on every continent on Earth. It rides on the mirrors of a telescope, reading light from the dawn of the universe, and it still sits, in trace amounts, inside the very phone you're holding right now. Nothing about gold ever changed. Everything around it did. Perhaps that's the real answer to the question we opened with. History remembers its kings, its conquerors, its priests and pharaohs. But maybe it was never really the kings who ruled. Maybe it was the metal they were all so desperately chasing, the whole time, from the riverbank to the vault. Gold wasn't just a precious metal. It was the thing every civilization bent itself around, and the one thing none of them could ever truly possess for long.